More fingers and holes in a filthy stag weekend, Scorn wastes no time in throwing the player into a grotesque flesh-covered mechanical hellhole. After being announced about 8 years ago in November 2014, Scorn is finally released on the Xbox Series X, S and PC. Throughout its development time there was a large amount of speculation as to what Scorn actually was. Inspired by the recognisable and sexualised artwork of H.R. Geiger, the same art that inspired the xenomorphin ship in the movie Alien, many wondered, including myself, is this a first-person action game, a survival horror, driving simulator? What Scorn was going to be was a huge mystery in itself as it was being kept behind closed doors. I've been looking forward to this game as a fan of the Geiger inspiration, and it begs to be the backdrop of a horror game. The more reveals and snippets we had though always pulled that excitement back a bit as I grew more cautious that this game might not be what I had hoped for, and I think the global expectations of Scorn are perhaps what has made it one of the most divisive games of the year. Critic reviews are all over the place, some giving the game as high as 9s and 8s out of 10, and some are as low as 2s and 4s. Not everyone agrees with an arbitrary number summarising a game's quality, but they still remain a basic indication of the critic's experience on a game without taking in context behind the score. I won't be giving you a numbered score on Scorn, but what I will be doing is giving you my opinion. Let's set the record straight. If you're hoping for a first-person action game or full-on horror, then you are setting yourself up to be massively disappointed with Scorn. Speculation can be put to rest. Scorn is first and foremost a puzzle exploration game. There are snippets of combat and survival horror in there, and I will talk about those shortly, but Scorn doesn't do enough with these mechanics to convince anyone it will win any action game awards, nor is it particularly scary. If this is not what you're looking for in Scorn, then I might sound crazy here, but if it's not your cup of tea, then don't drink it. However, I think there is enough here in Scorn to make for a compelling and enjoyable game, despite some incredibly frustrating gameplay design choices. In fact, some of its shortcomings feel like they exist because the gameplay is created to fit in the aesthetical backdrop, rather than the setting and tone being based around the gameplay. We awaken an advanced alien world that is a character within itself, literally pulsating with life. Impossible in scale, this crumbled civilization is a hauntingly beautiful and somber backdrop to the game, and whilst graphics and setting cannot always save a game, I can't deny that here in Scorn it really does amplify the enjoyment of the game, and is the backbone of the whole experience with the atmosphere it creates. I was glued to the screen like Jim on porn, immediately engrossed by the atmosphere resonating around the world, and I found myself aimlessly wandering around for about 45 minutes. Initially because I was in awe at the spectacle, but eventually because I didn't have the slightest clue what I was doing. Individual puzzles in the form of some wacky looking dentist chairs, some train tracks and these weird eggs on a wall, all interlinked through corridors and elevators that need literal fingering to get up. The amount of puzzles the game presented me with was honestly a little overwhelming at first before I realised this egg moving puzzle was the only thing that allowed me to do anything, so I persisted until it was resolved. When this egg was taken down to my collection point like Argos at Christmas time, I said out loud, oh shit, something is happening. I had a living embryo thing ready for a good sacrifice, and this is the first hour of the game and I had solved one puzzle. It was at this point my girlfriend was on her way to bed and asked me if I was having fun with my new game. Am I having fun, I thought? I don't think I am. Much of the early stages of the game was me saying to myself, I'll go this way. Oh, nothing works, then I'll go this way. It felt like I was running over the same old ground for the tiniest advancement, but I persevered. After a quick jump scare and a walk across an empty desert, I came across the next large puzzle in the game, and this is when I clicked that these were not random puzzles scattered throughout the levels, but they were all cogs in a much larger machine. Entire levels themselves were puzzles that needed to be solved by smaller puzzles and tasks within them, and once they started coming together it became very rewarding and satisfying jumping the final hurdle and seeing the finished result. The game suddenly clicked and who knew? I was having fun. Batteries included with as many phallic objects as your mother's bedside drawer. Each level or area has a theme or device centred throughout that section's puzzles, ranging from a number of mini-games such as a rotation puzzle game to build a key, or these little test tube babies that need crushing for their blood. Yeah, it's pretty messed up, and these keys that will be with you over the course of the game, essentially a key card reader that gets higher access as you progress, to these little hidden blade-like keys that strap to your arm. What I particularly liked about these devices, or the in-world mechanisms you interact with, are how interconnected it all feels with everything else. From elevators or hidden pathways, revealing new ways to traverse the levels and puzzles. It is a giant labyrinth of rooms and corridors, and it all does a great job at feeling naturally connected, adding to the living and breathing world. Further to this, the game is in first person and there is no ghost body that many games have. We actually have arms and legs attached to the body that can be viewed when looking down to view our ammo, healing items and our consistently tortured body. The body will slowly change over time due to the story and damage taken by the player, which I found added to the immersion, along with how the character's arms and legs interact with the world around us. Scorn is quite remarkable at the best of times, and frustratingly paced at its worst. There is no map to refer to, nor is there anything signposted for you. It is entirely down to the player to discover the path and solutions. All is achievable if you have patience with yourself and take the game at its own stride. I am the first person to jump on Google to solve a puzzle, and I didn't have to do this once despite the game having no hands to hold throughout my playthrough, which concluded just shy of 5.5 hours. A playtime that was extended due to the downright terrible combat addition that tarnished those great moments sporadically. The weapons at your disposal are single shot weapons, so don't expect any AK-47s or BFGs here. The first is a hole puncher gun, allowing for a double pierce before it activates a reload timer, one that seems pretty lengthy before it can be fired again. This gun takes no ammo, so it can be used infinitely, however the damage is pretty low if you can even hit an enemy. Some do seem to have a weak spot that can kill them in one, ripping out whatever the hell this is, but actually hitting this spot seemed to be down to more luck than skill. A 6-shot pistol that isn't too accurate unless you stand and aim as the reticle narrows in on your target. A shotgun that is probably the best weapon in the game as it will stagger whatever you hit, allowing prep for the next shot, and finally a grenade launcher that, to be honest, is pretty undervalued as a weapon, as once it is obtained, it is primarily used for some late game puzzles instead of making mincemeat out of the creatures. The creatures are pretty bland after a while as well and don't differentiate themselves too much from each other. Most enemies you come across fire projectiles in the form of acid, vomit, or these little seed grenade things, with the one other enemy type being a heavy armoured charging enemy outside a few minor threats like these one-eyed willies hanging from a ceiling or the game's one boss type enemy. The enemy variety does wear thin pretty quickly, and this is not helped by the poor combat mechanics themselves, which make the fights more of a nuisance than anything else. For instance, most of the combat had me popping off one shot, running away, getting close for another shot and running away again, just so I didn't get hit by an acid projectile or headbutted by a charging bounce, and you get caught in this cycle of hit run. It's not very strategic, in fact it kind of feels pretty cheap, and I was surprised of how many enemies there actually were on screen at one time. 3 to 4 at times, and for this style of game I expected perhaps one every now and then as part of a puzzle, but it gets pretty consistent. This can make This can make the game feel a little inconsistent in itself, as the core gameplay was interrupted by these combat sections which were not balanced at all, which I don't expect to be saying whilst wielding a flesh magnum. The weapons themselves made sense within the world and they looked fantastic, but if possible I would eventually bait the enemies out as they have a short attention span, to then just stroll right past them rather than killing them, and there were some very annoying deaths here. To help along the way you have a little spider crab-like inventory, I mean no names are ever mentioned here so I am just making this shit up on the spot, that holds your health in the form of blood pouches and ammo for your weapons. This does add some sort of survival horror element to the game as resources are scarce, only being able to replenish resources through these top-up stations found throughout levels, and each station cannot be replenished in itself. This for me did add a needed layer of tension to the combat as I had to manage my health points and ammo. I always came close to being out of both, but just in the nick of time I would stumble across a new refill station which always came with a sense of relief. Should you run out of ammo, then the hole punching gun, as I said, does not run out, but instead has that short regen time between every 2 shots. But this is the most frustrating way to fight enemies due to the hit and run mechanic that I mentioned, and having to get close you are more often than not guaranteed to be hit a few times by the acid with no way of evading it, especially when in tight narrow corridors. You just have to accept the hit and hope that the creatures die before you do. On top of this, at a certain point in the game something happens that causes you to randomly lose health at specific points in the game. I can see this going 2 ways for players depending on how you manage your health during the combat sections. Each time this happens, it takes off 2 health points, and I like this idea as it did add an element of dread to the game, as if there wasn't already enough. However, if you struggle with the combat due to the aforementioned issues, then I can see this bending you over backwards and having its way with you. The game does have an autosave feature, however you would most likely need to restart the whole level to overcome this if you have no healing items and your health is low before the point of the unavoidable loss. Lucky for me, I didn't have this problem, so I think it had the intended effect of horror that this could happen, as opposed to the frustration of it actually happening, which is also very, very possible. Combat isn't the focus of the game, however to my surprise it did become far more prominent than that has any right to be in what it offers to the player. This is a prime case of taking a fascinating, mesmerising, puzzle-solving walking simulator and putting in elements to have more appeal for the masses, but in retrospect it harms the game more than it enhances, scaring off those potential players. Therefore I think many people may argue that the game would have been better off if the combat was removed entirely. However, I would disagree with this, as the weapons and world open up a range of possibilities with the combat that, if there was no combat, we would probably complain that this was a missed opportunity. So for me it's not a case that the game would have been better without it, but the game would have been better if it had better combat. And would the game have been better with a less ambiguous narrative? I won't be giving any big late game spoilers here, nor will I pretend to make any sense of some sort of story, as honestly I don't even know if I could confidently give you a meaningful spoiler anyway. There is no dialogue in the game or characters we interact with in a welcoming manner at least, so it's down to the environment itself to tell the story. In fact, the main character of the game I would say is the environment, however it is hard to piece together a narrative from environmental storytelling when everything is so messed up it appears random. Now when I say random, the world is meticulously designed. There is nothing random about it in a way that everything is just shoved in. It is all very specific and there is definitely method in the madness, but you may struggle to gel together any sort of comprehensive narrative. Piles of dead bodies, destruction and overgrown environments, towering structures with symbolism of cocks and doggy style. Something clearly went on here with this advanced alien civilization, and I was drip-fed visual lore, but what it all means is down to the player interpretation to the fullest extent for most of the game. After completing the first act, we die of some sort of toxic gas and then born again from an egg of some sort as a new character and seek this huge structure in the middle of the desert to fulfill the previous being's work. So we are not trying to escape but get deeper into this labyrinth, so I guess the main objective and mystery of the game is why we are doing this and who we are, a mystery that is teased as you look around the environments without ever being given anything concrete. I do like this form of storytelling as it creates a sense of awe, but honestly I can see this being a little too much, or more accurately not enough here. The game as well is very much a one and done thing, and I would have liked to see a little more freedom on how to complete puzzles in the game. In the beginning it does give the impression this will be the case, giving the illusion that puzzles can be done in your own order and with more than one solution. The example of this is the very first puzzle allows you to either sacrifice or save this creature to assist you in opening the door, but from what I could tell this is the only time it gave me a definitive choice and it didn't affect the game in any way. Everything else is very set in its one solution, and I'm not even convinced saving this poor guy was the better option for him either. Poor bugger. In the game's climax I did have my own perceived ideas of what was going on, and I liked what the game was implying and our character's goal. The meaning of Scorn is taken to a whole new level, but I'll let you make up your own minds. I'm sure there are going to be tons of other videos explaining the story and meaning of Scorn in far better ways than I could anyway, as I would just feel like I'm talking out of my arse with the ramblings of a madman trying to explain what he saw in the year 2442 to a bunch of folks in 1982. But does all this lead to a solid recommendation? It really does go back to whether you are into this type of game. I mean, isn't any game correct? But with Scorn, what the developers have given us here is an experience that will drop your jaw at times and induce a headache another. But despite my frustrations with combat and tedious exploration at times, it is an experience I can say I enjoyed very much. The atmosphere and setting here are the main attraction, with enough enjoyable puzzles that provide a sense of accomplishment, especially in those moments when you see all of your hard work pay off with everything falling into place like a well-oiled machine. It makes it well worth your time and it won't take much of it. Scorn is short and sweet with the occasional bitter aftertaste, but if you're looking for something a little different and aren't afraid of things getting ugly in both an emotional and visual sense, then munch away. And that's it from me. Thanks for watching, I really do appreciate it. If you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Let me know what you thought of the game in the comments below, and if you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to the channel to catch all my upcoming videos. Bye bye for now.
Going on.